Welcome to July webinar. And the topic of this month is the hyperscalers tactics in telecom. Colleagues who are like following my webinars, I did one webinar before about the hyperscalers positioning in telecom domain. And this time I'm going to assess the moves and the tactics that are there in the market. I will avoid going into the product details, and we will talk about the strategy and what's happening in the market. As usual, there is the Q&A utility. You can just post the question in the Q&A, and we can discuss that right after each section. And any question that are not to be covered during the webinar, I'm going to also post that offline in LinkedIn, and the whole webinar video will be available on YouTube. Let me just start, and please tell me, because last time there was one complaint that slides does not move, slides freeze with the animation. So if you feel that slides are not moving, just please update me. Now we are in slide 2, which is like the title and my bio. So I would say taking care of a full horizontal domain in ICT, like that spans across radio, core, transport, cloud, SDN, NFV, orchestration, also SBSS. So that's why I always try to touch technologies from different angles to see it from different perspectives. I always try to stick to standards as possible, or any kind of de facto open source initiatives, and in, I would say, the majority of my slides, I always put the reference from where I got the information, if it's not my own conclusion or investigation. Great. So let's start. And I just want to highlight that I have a cat in the room, so please do not mind the jingles and if she comes in front of the laptop. But I'm babysitting the cat today, so I hope you don't mind that. Okay, so I prepared a storyboard that actually starts with some foundation about the concept of cloud, and what are the cloud models or the cloud stacks that can exist in a CSP environment, like the communication service provider, that's the abbreviation. And then once we understand that and we have this common ground, we understand how the hyperscalers like try to get in, what are the entry points for hyperscalers to go and penetrate the telecom domain. And then we will, I give some highlights about the market direction in that arena. And I will give like, I will zoom on a case study. It's actually AT&T. And then we talk about what are the value proposition like by the hyperscalers like Microsoft, Google, Alibaba, and AWS. And then we end up with some assessment. I mean, from telco perspective, what are the opportunities for service provider and what are the threats that are possessed by this kind of partnership. And then if you have time, we leave the floor for the Q&A and for the discussion. Before I do that, I commonly initiate a poll to understand the background of the attendees. So I hope that you don't mind if you answer this initial poll. I will just launch it now. And if anyone doesn't see it, please update me. Okay, 5 colleagues are left, and we have 10 seconds left as well. Okay, let me just take a screenshot of this one. Okay, so thanks a lot. So just to give you the I'd say the anatomy or the classification of the attendees today. So the majority are coming from cloud infrastructure and cloud domain and the SDN and NFV. We have a very good portion coming from IP network and transmission and radio access and the mobile core, and this is actually the CSP part. So we have the mix of both the cloud, the background of cloud and the background of the telco, and also we have colleagues from IT as well. So I guess we are covering most of the domains, the technological domains. And let me share the results with you. Okay. So let's start. So as usual, I always try with some sort of a standard definition because, you know, in the domain of cloud and even in the domain of telco, there are a lot of definitions for many technologies. So that sometimes causes like confusion and uncertainty. So I chose a little bit older definition of cloud computing, which I personally used, okay, because that was the definition by the NIST, the National Institute of Standardization and Technology. It's an American entity, and they put a definition for cloud computing in 2011. And actually, while we were starting the journey in the telco in 2000, I would say 14 and 15, so we used this definition to put a framework of what is actually cloud computing. So I'll just read quickly the definition, and I will stress on some point that we will take it forward. So cloud computing is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. So network, server, storage, application, and services that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort and service provider interaction. So that was the definition by that time, but we extracted some important information from that definition, which is the following: that the cloud model is composed of 5 essential characteristics that whenever they are fulfilled, you can call the setup as a cloud computing or cloud, and 3 service models and 4 deployment models. In the next slide, I'm going to list these characteristics and the service models and the 4 deployment models, and you will see that most of us actually are familiar with that, but I just wanted to put the origin of this definition and like a cornerstone that we can rely on to start the webinar. So what are these characteristics? And I'm sure most of us will understand that one of the cloud characteristics that it is on-demand self-service, that you don't get the resources granted anytime, permanently, like we did in the physical domain. You get a chassis and then you get your service. Whether you're utilizing 10%, 90%, you still get the full chassis. No, the cloud is on-demand self-service. So whenever you need the service, you get it on demand, and you get it in a self-service fashion. So you can get it by yourself, by portals, by a dynamic way. So that's one of the characteristics of the cloud. Broad network access, the target by that time that to define that these resources can be accessed by different means, by terminals, by mobiles, by portals, by CLIs, by scripts. So many methods to access the service. And then the third thing, which is very well known about the cloud, that it is a resource pooling, I would say, setup. So a lot of consumers, many users share the same cloud and sharing resources, and that's actually what fulfilled the resources efficiency of the cloud compared to the physical environments. The rapid elasticity, and that was one of the pain points with the telcos, that whenever you want to scale or to upgrade your chassis, you purchase an order, you get an hardware, and you do expansion and a night action, and it takes a lot of time to expand your setup to cater for the increase, for example, in traffic. But with cloud, you have this rapid elasticity. You have the options to scale out, scale in, or scale up, scale down according to the methodology. So you can scale to the, I would say, the requirement of the user, or to the, for example, the traffic increase in many cases in the telco domains. And then measured service, that, because basically, the typical models of the cloud that you pay per usage, then you have to have a measurable service, how much CPU are you utilizing, the RAM, the storage, and even you have to monitor the SLAs and availability, because that's what the customer pays for. So these are like the main characteristics of the cloud. Whenever they are verified or realized, then you have what you can call a cloud. And then a typical service models by that time were I would say, well known and still known till now, and more models are being evolving. But you have the infrastructure as a service, IaaS, or sometimes they call it IaaS, and the platform as a service, the PaaS, and software as a service, SaaS. So the infrastructure as a service, that the cloud is only leasing infrastructure in terms of computational power, in terms of storage, in terms of networking. And then actually the cloud provider doesn't care a lot about what kind of application that you are onboarding, because that's your part. The cloud is only providing an infrastructure. Platform as a service, or PaaS, is a little bit higher when the cloud is giving you some sort of an environment to develop or design your applications. And it can be also seen from different angle, that PaaS is like the cloud is giving you a platform, for example, to doing supplementary function like database as a service, monitoring as a service, assurance as a service. So all these are considered PaaS. And software as a service, when you get the full stack, like the application on top of the stack as a service. And by the way, you will see in the slides and in the community that now there are a lot of 5G offerings, and OSS, BSS are offered as a software as a service. So for example, the operator doesn't purchase the software, but subscribe to a cloud-based application that does the function of OSS or BSS or monitoring. So SaaS now is very, I would say, common model on the telcos, and for sure it is a very, very common model on enterprise level. And then the deployment models, and I'm sure many of us know that these are like the term that were defined by 2011: private cloud, public cloud, community cloud, and hybrid cloud. So private cloud is mainly like a cloud that is exclusively leased or administrated or targeting a certain group of users, okay, like a certain in a certain organization. And I'll give you example on private cloud in telcos, like the IT cloud, for example. And then public cloud, that is like a publicly shared cloud resources that's not exclusively by a certain organization. It's open for a public access. And then community cloud, that was a term, I would say, suggested by NIST, that's actually a cloud that may have like different group of users from different organizations that share the same interests. For example, a cloud for R&D across universities, a cloud for analytics that gather multiple organizations. That's a community cloud. And then a hybrid cloud, which is actually a mix of a private and public cloud. When you have this like multiple clouds and you need one to be seen as one cloud, but it's actually beneath, there is like a flavor of a private and public cloud. So that was in 2011, and that was the initial, I would say, starting point, at least for people who took these aspects and tried to map that in the telco. And I told you that I did that personally in 2014-15. I studied these characteristics. I tried to map these into the telco domain, and put pressure on the vendors to deliver that. So, but actually, in a CSP environment, there are more definite terms, okay, actually, that define what kind of clouds are there in the CSP. And I brought you some examples of what kind of clouds that can be founded in a CSP. And this slide is very important because we will have this logic and move to the entry points of the hyperscalers to know exactly what hyperscaler is targeting out of these clouds. So let's start with the first, I'd say, well-known type of uh, of the clouds in the CSP environment, which is actually the IT cloud. That's the term always used in the CSP environments. So the IT cloud, and that's one of the oldest cloud that can exist in a CSP environment. This is the cloud that hosts the internal IT applications. Okay, so whenever you have an IT system, okay, you commonly get this system onboarded and deployed in an IT cloud. And for sure, it's a flavor of a private cloud, and VMware actually was one of, and still one of the market leaders in this one. So the majority of the private clouds in the CSPs are based on VMware, and most of the IT applications actually, even from the old days, they are very coupled with VMware. I just had a question about CSP. CSP is a communication service provider. Communication service provider, which is actually the mobile operators, for example. Second type that you always see it in the operators or the CSP, you find something called enterprise cloud. And enterprise cloud, that's the attempt from the operators to have a flavor of a public cloud that can be provided to their enterprise customer offering B2B service. And it varies. They can offer infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, even software as a service. And it goes well actually in the operators or the countries where the hyperscaler doesn't have access, or for some reason there are some regulations prevents the enterprises to host their application on the hyperscalers, I would say external DCs. So in that model, it perfectly makes sense for the operator to have an enterprise cloud or a public cloud. And then starting from 2011 with the evolution of the NFV and HC NFV, and I would say from 2013, 14, the term telco cloud started to be, I would say, more bold. And the term telco cloud, when someone say telco cloud, that's actually the cloud that is providing infrastructure as a service to hosting telco VNFs. Okay, so telco cloud initially is a flavor of a private cloud, but the deployment itself is actually somehow a little bit stick to HCNFV stack. They have different functional components, differ from the IT cloud. They have the Mono, the NFVO, the VNFM. And one of the characteristics of this telco cloud that it is actually integrated to the OSS for the assurance. So assurance is a very, I would say, the main ingredient of the telco cloud. So that's the telco cloud. And you can always see in the operators a lot of other private clouds, because there are a lot of silos that were built by vendors. So for example, you can find vendor X providing a certain application, and to provide certain application virtualized, they provided the full stack. So you end up with multiple silos inside the operator. You find that there's cloud X, Y, and Z. There are all flavors of a private cloud, but they exist. Okay, it's not one unified private cloud, but you can find multiple private clouds. So these are the cloud stacks that most probably will be there in a typical CSP: the IT cloud, the enterprise cloud or public cloud, and telco cloud, and other private cloud stacks. So we gave an overview about the current cloud stacks in the CSPs. Now let me just focus on the telco cloud deployment models that you may find, or you might find in the last few years, and then we will take it, and then we will jump into the entry points of the hyperscalers. So for telco cloud deployment models, as I said, telco cloud is a special kind of a private cloud that is usually, and I'm saying usually, not 100%, that sticks to a certain reference architecture provided by HCNFV, which is European Telecommunication Standardization Institute, and NFV, that's Network Functions Virtualization. So that's in the right, that's the reference architecture. So commonly we witnessed in the last 6 years 3 different deployment model of T-Cloud. The first one, I call it single vendor setup or silo. And that is usually originating from a use case driven RFP. What is a use case driven RFP? For example, you issue an RFP to host IMS, for example. And then when you host this, when you do the IMS thing, you get a certain vendor, for example, ZTE or Huawei, okay? And for sure, respect to all vendors. So to onboard Huawei IMS, then Huawei brings you the full stack. For example, Fusion Sphere, Fusion Storage, and Cloud Opera. So they bring you the full cloud stack. Then you get a setup that is actually 100% tuned and provided by one vendor. This may happen also if you are like a small operator, you don't welcome multi-vendor stuff. For example, you get Ericsson Core, and when you get Ericsson Core, you get Ericsson hardware HDS, you get Ericsson Cloud Execution Environment as an open stack, and you get Ericsson solution for containers and Ericsson VNFM, Ericsson NFVO. Then you get a full cloud stack from one vendor. So this has always been seen as a vendor lock, because at the end, it's very challenging to onboard external VNFs or VNFs from competitors on a certain telco vendor cloud. Imagine onboarding Ericsson on a Huawei cloud and vice versa. It's a little bit complicated and it will take time. But there are examples in the market are doing that, and there are public releases, PRs on that. For example, Swisscom, they are having a full Ericsson stack. Some operators in the Gulf, they have a full Huawei stack. There is a second deployment model, which was seen by that time that is very aggressive. We called it a la carte model. And as you see the color code here, I hope you can see it. You can get the hardware from someone, the virtualization layer from another vendor, different VNFs from different vendors, and even generic VNFM, NFVO. And that model was adopted by AT&T. So by that time, AT&T in 2014-15 was the market leader in that direction. That AT&T had their own army of developers. They had a great contribution in the open source initiative, leading open source initiatives. So they had this mindset and they went through this direction. But we will see in the coming slides how AT&T were, I would say, how their way of thinking changed by years. But for the time being, I'm showing you what is the model that was adopted by AT&T and maybe NTT Docomo by that time, that we will go for a la carte model. We will pick the best of breed in each domain, and we will do the integration by ourselves. In the middle, there was one other choice that you, as an operator, try to have some sort of a multi-vendor open model relying on a system integrator. Okay. So, for example, you do an infrastructure-driven RFP, like you do an RFP to build the cloud. You address the RFP to system integrators that can bring you a multi-vendor stack and commit to integrate. And we saw that actually in many operators. We saw that in Telefonica, we saw that in STC. So that was seen as something in the middle. But one of the negative things about that model, and we saw that in the market, that the VNF onboarding, or to onboard a new VNF, that had like somehow a bad reputation, that it takes like months to do an onboarding because it's a multi-vendor thing. But at the end, that was always the first onboarding. But when you do like multiple onboarding for the same VNF, it gets onboarded automatically and dynamically. So these are the 3 telco cloud deployment models that have been there in the market for the last 5 years. That was the foundation that I wanted to give before I start assessing how the hyperscalers are trying to get in, what are the entry points of the what are, I would say, in the next section, I'm going to talk about the hyperscalers and what are the entry points. So let me take some like few questions before I move to that part. So there is a question. What about microservices in Telco Cloud? Where does it fall in slide 7? Is this the evolution of VNFs? So that's a good question. Like if you go like 2 years back, the whole HCNFV reference architecture and the HCNFV standards were only covering the VNFs. We're only covering the VNFs. But with the evolution of containers, there are more and more draft documents are being coming from HCNFV, but labeled from the community by a little bit late. So there are other initiatives trying to make use of this gap in the HCNFV and enforce some solutions. But as an answer, yes, currently there are draft standards and yet to be, I would say, solid ones that are going also to handle the microservices, the containers in the scope of HCNFV. Another question, the question is, in a la carte model, CSP themselves do all integration testing. How difficult, time consuming effort is that? Yes, actually, if you see the case of AT&T, there were really hundreds of developers, and sometimes they say thousands, I'm not sure, but there was a focus from AT&T to do that. And in order to do that, they were picky in choosing the application that are going to be integrated. For example, they went for Affirmed from the very beginning. So they want for a vendor that's actually cloud friendly, at least. They went for Brocade. They went for Mirantis OpenStack. They went for Open Contrail. So their choices were open to ease their job to do the integration, right? So a la carte model works well when you choose a good open source or good open products in general, and you do the integration. So those were the two questions. Okay, and there's a question about Microsoft and AT&T. We will discuss that because that's an evolution of AT&T, I would say, way of thinking and the mindset. Let's go now to the hyperscalers entry points. So I'm listing here all the cases, okay? So either it's a brownfield setup, and brownfield means that it is existing, up and running, and changing is a little bit difficult, but it exists. So you do modernization. Greenfield, it's a new thing that hasn't been there before, and you are building a new thing. So let's take it one by one. So, and the title here is actually cooperation versus competition. So public cloud was 100% a competition. Okay, so the operators, mobile operators, they had the attempt to build their own public cloud, offering public services for their enterprise, but they were really challenged and impacted by the evolution or the huge presence of the hyperscalers. Okay, so in a public cloud, it was a pure competition between both of them, but we will see that in the next slide that it started to be a cooperation. Somehow the operators is trying to enlarge the portfolio by the hyperscalers offering and merge the offerings to be like one bundle to their enterprise customer. So that's the public cloud. On the IT cloud, it's a little bit different, okay? Because in the IT cloud, again, this is a private cloud that has always hosted the IT applications. Like, and IT application can be anything. Can be an office system, can be an Active Directory, can be a database, can be anything, even BSS. So we have seen in the last years, many vendors have certified their IT applications on AWS, on Google, and I'll just pick AWS as an example. So to migrate the applications from the IT cloud to AWS, and that's a brownfield thing, some applications can be migrated because they are certified on AWS, but the others are still very coupled with their existing operating system like VMware, okay? In addition, there are some regulations, and that's there in my region, in the Middle East and in the Gulf, that actually prevents hosting these IT application on public cloud because they host and they carry sensitive data. So, and again, also one important thing, that the procurement way or the procurement mindset currently in the Middle East, that we buy software. We don't, I would say, recommend a lot that we do subscription based on a cloud-based software. Most of the procurement processes currently are purchasing software. So they would like to host the software on their cloud. For sure, this will change, but I'm talking about the current state. So all these factors will always put a weight to IT cloud. So IT cloud will remain, but the possible scenario that we will have like some sort of a hybrid cloud, that you'll host some IT application on your on-prem IT cloud, and some application will be hosted on public cloud. And that's why the term of hybrid cloud orchestration or hybrid cloud governance is always there, always discussed whenever you, I would say, assess this point. Telco cloud, existing telco cloud that host legacy, not legacy, like VNFs, like bulky VNFs, like IMS, consumer core. The hyperscalers, I would say, they are not interested in really to migrate or to host these applications. Hyperscalers, you will see in the greenfield, they are interested to host the re-innovated telco cloud. They are interested to host the microservices, the light CNFs. But to go there and migrate, for example, a virtual media gateway or a virtual DPI from an established telco cloud on-prem to a public cloud, this is very painful. So the hyperscalers, they don't focus much on the consumer telco cloud or in the bulky VNFs. Most probably this will stay as it is on-prem cloud. You can find also some private enterprise clouds in this operator that hosts, for example, SD-WAN solution, EVCP solution, value-added services, virtual firewall that is being leased to enterprises. Here, there is a competition because the hyperscalers or the public cloud, there is also an environment that's hosting many enterprise solutions for enterprise. For example, there are some SD-WAN vendors, and I'm sure colleagues here know that. They sell directly to the enterprise customer, hosting their solution on a public cloud. So you see the operator is not in the equation. So there are many SD-WAN vendors, many enterprise solutions on the public cloud, and also there are some enterprise solutions hosted on the on-prem. Most probably, if the regulations allow, these enterprise services hosted on-prem can be easily migrated to public cloud. So eventually, you will rarely see any enterprise service hosted on the CSP environment. So now we go to the greenfield, which is more interesting. So there are like new technology that hasn't been there before. So that's a sweet spot for hyperscalers because they can easily go in, show their capabilities, commit, and acquire. One of them is the Telco Edge and the Enterprise Edge. So they are very competent when they offer, for example, Edge in a box. You will see in the next slide that, for example, Microsoft can come to you and tell you, I can give you a full 5G core with IoT application in a box. And you can start lead that directly to your enterprise customer. This is like a very well-known advantage of the hyperscaler. They can do that in a box and they ship it to you the same way they ship their enterprise services to their customers. In Telco Edge, and I'm here saying Telco Edge to refer to, for example, the O-RAN stuff and the 5G core. If you search in Google now, you find that, for example, Google, the searching engine, you find, for example, that there are a lot of attention now being given from hyperscalers to the O-RAN in particular. Google has recently joined the O-RAN Alliance. AWS showed in the MWC the onboarding of, I think, Altiostar, and they partnered with Dish, the operator in USA, to onboard the O-RAN on AWS, on the Outpost. Same for Microsoft. So they are all focusing to get in this market and provide a full solution on the edge to the mobile operators. The renovated telco clouds, these are like the telco cloud that's hosting microservice containers, and that's where the hyperscalers are focusing to give you the environment and the platform as a service to host your 5G applications and your stuff. And for sure, the most suitable coupling comes with a greenfield operators. And you also, the case of Dish in the US. So Dish has picked AWS to be the cloud platform hosting all their core and edge and ORAN stuff, entertaining like functions from Nokia, if I remember well. So greenfield operators, they go for the hyperscalers, and there is a point here, and we will see that in the advantages of the hyperscaler and the threats. These new operators, they prefer to go to OpEx model rather than CapEx model, and I'll explain that. So the CapEx model, and that's the typical model that we are following in the traditional procurement cycle of the mobile operator, that you do investment, you save budget, you buy software, you buy hardware, you put a lot of CapEx, and then you do your best to get revenue out of the services coming from this investment. So that's a CapEx model. But if you go to hyperscalers, for example, you switch, I wouldn't say totally, but to a big extent, to an OpEx model. You go to a subscription based. So everything is hosted on cloud on AWS. You get more customers, you get more revenue, you pay you pay to the AWS. But if you don't get traffic, so you get minimal consumption, minimal customers, then also you pay AWS a little bit. So it's like pay as you go, and that's a model somehow preferred by the new operators, new MVNOs, not to put a huge investment, not to put huge CapEx thing, but rather focus on OpEx model. And what you can see here, I will end with this one, that's the spanning between the brownfield and greenfield, something called hybrid and multi-cloud governance. When you start to welcome hyperscalers, you find that as a CSP, you end up with multiple cloud stacks. I have an IT cloud on-prem, I have an Azure, maybe I have an AWS, I have a Telco cloud. So how can I govern, how can I manage, orchestrate all these clouds? There are some solutions provided by the hyperscalers to give this kind of capability, and I'll not talk about product, but I'll mention Microsoft Arc, for example. And Arc is some sort of enhancement of the existing arm of Microsoft. So it allows you to manage multiple clouds, multiple environments like VM-based Kubernetes and Azure. So if you have this kind of framework, you'll be able to manage multi-clouds on your environment. I hope that was clear. There are some questions. I will take it, and then we can continue. So one question. Verizon mentioned Bluefield. It's like between brown and greenfield. Well, brown and greenfield is like very legacy terms that we always use in our work. Greenfield, it's a greenfield, it's a new environment. Brown, that is existing. I'm not sure really what is Bluefield. Okay, but even in greenfield, Rakuten seemed to have chosen CapEx model, while Dish seems more like OpEx model. Is this roughly right? That's a very good question. I will also mention Rakuten in the next slide. So next slide is some, I would say, feeds from the market. What's happening, okay? I mean, entry points in terms of the market movements. So there are some acquisitions, cooperation, and strategic partnership. I picked some examples. So Microsoft, to have like a sharp portfolio that enabled Microsoft to enter the telecom market, they did acquisitions. They acquired Affirmed, they acquired Metaswitch, and resulted from that, Microsoft now, they have a full 5G offering, like an IMS. They can offer anything in a box. So they have this kind of way of approaching that. If you get Azure for operators, you get our full stack of core functions, of cloud native function, and that's what helped them in AT&T, because actually AT&T already had Affirmed and Metaswitch, so that's what made the deal more easy. On the other hand, for example, AWS doesn't seem to do the same. They don't acquire or get companies, but they tended to do a lot of partnerships. And I just extracted some names, latest announcement. NEC 5G core is on AWS. Netcracker OSS BSS on AWS. Amdocs OSS orchestration on AWS. Ericsson BSS on AWS. Nokia Mavenir or RAN, and a lot of many other things on AWS. So that's one of the value proposition of AWS. That when you get AWS, you get this list of certified partners, so you can just go with a digital experience to drag and drop what kind of application that you want, or you can enjoy a SaaS model, software as a service model, from these partners. So this is like some directions from the hyperscaler. From the other side, the operators, they go into strategic partnerships. We see that in the market. Lately, last year, maybe earlier this year, SEC announced an investment of $500 million in Alibaba Cloud. So that's one of the strategic partnerships. We all saw the AT&T announcement with Microsoft Azure, and the next slide is a case study of AT&T. And I guess a few days also, British Telecom BT announced the same strategic partnership with Microsoft Azure. So Rakuten is a little bit different because Rakuten is not just a mobile operator. Okay, think of Rakuten as a cloud platform provider, same like AWS. So they build their Rakuten Mobile in Japan with a certain setup, and they will try to replicate this model to all operators. So they are going to sell this cloud platform, same like AWS is doing. They are going to build that to other operators. We see there's a lot of agreements and partnerships and MOUs that were signed. Rakuten with Etisalat, Rakuten with STC, Rakuten with some operators in Germany. So Rakuten is not just a mobile operator. No, they are also a cloud platform operator. They see themselves as one of the coming hyperscalers, and they are going to replicate this model to other operators. I'm going to just give a case study of AT&T, a quick case study of AT&T, and then we will see the questions. So AT&T is a very, very, okay, before we do that, and I showed that in the last webinar, starting from last year, 2019 and 20, last 2 years, a lot of announcements are being there, like Verizon AWS for the edge, for example, Orange and Google Cloud for the full cloud, and AT&T, even 2 years back, they partnered with Microsoft to enable solution on the edge. Okay, so it has been happening, from the last 2 years, but I now focus on AT&T because I know that all of you saw the latest announcement of AT&T and Microsoft, and I felt that maybe colleagues are keen to understand the storyboard. Okay, so AT&T is a very special case because when we started the cloud journey, and for sure it's still the same till now, AT&T is a role model for us because they have been always leading the technology, contributing to the open source initiatives, leading the sessions on the OpenStack Summit. So AT&T really was a different case because before that date, vendors were the ones who used to drive the technology. But with the evolution of this kind of technicalities and software development skills in AT&T, they started to push the community in the software track. So in 2016, and I extracted some text from a lecture by 2016, but I highlighted something that I'm going to stress on. So in 2016, AT&T announced this AIC, the AT&T Integrated Cloud, which is the name changed now into Network Cloud. So the ingredients were very interesting of that cloud. So they use an open source OpenStack management framework from Mirantis. So that was their choice for Mirantis. They went for a Metaswitch for the IMS. And remember that Metaswitch now acquired by Microsoft. And from orchestration perspective, they were a little bit moving far from the HCNFV. They had different directions, but they had a lot of focus on the eComp, the Enhanced Control Orchestration Management and Policy Platform, which is then turned to be the ONAP. So AT&T was the sponsor of the ONAP. And then they had Amdocs at the ONAP or eComp integrator. They had Juniper Contrail, and they pushed Juniper to have it like as an open source thing, an open source Juniper contrail. And then they had a UCPE that it's an AT&T UCPE, and their choices were affirmed for the VEPC, and some parts were Cisco. So if you see their choices 2016, this is very matching the a la carte model that we talked about. They chose many vendors, and they took the ownership of doing the integration. They had nice, like, and I would say cloud-friendly selections. So they selected Metaswitch, Affirmed, which were booming by that time, and everything was going on smooth. And AT&T leading the industry and going open source. In 2019, 2 years back, they signed what they called an 8-digit deal with Mirantis to deploy Airship and introduce, this kind of containers flavor. So Airship is a project at OpenStack, giving some open source components to drive the infrastructure automation and the container delivery. So as you see, till 2019, AT&T was moving on the same direction, on the same partners, and they were preparing for the 5G by expanding Mirantis capabilities, introducing Airship. And then in 2021, lately, they announced that they are moving the full 5G cloud network to Microsoft Azure. So for people who were following the storyboard since the beginning, it was a little bit confusing, okay, because the direction is not, I would say, aligned. And even the hyperscalers, the Microsoft, they didn't focus a lot on the 5G consumer part, but that was the first time to get in the consumer market, not on the edge, not on the enterprise, but on the consumer, the 5G, the full 5G cloud. And what was interesting, that Microsoft will acquire AT&T Cloud Technology and team. So the team that AT&T built and software development since 2016 and 15, okay, Microsoft will acquire the team. And by the way, I'm just trying to interpret or read the news. I don't have any kind of news coming from different sources. I'm just reading the news and trying to assess. So you see that the direction has now changed. So the full team is being, I would say, sold to Microsoft. And then the 5G core, which was supposed to be taken care by ONAP and Mirantis and Airship, is now going to Azure. So what is the lesson learned here? That actually technology and strategies change, okay? Technologies and strategies change. And what was thought to be right on 2018 maybe will not be the right decision in 2020. So we as professionals, we have to adapt, and we have also to understand the underlying technology, not just focusing on press release, okay? Microsoft will provide huge capabilities to AT&T, 100% sure, but 2 years back, this step was not seen in the horizon at all, okay? Because the direction was going open source and these kinds of things. So that's a storyboard of AT&T. It's quite interesting. There are a lot of other details that we don't know actually, and maybe there are many things that's not technical stuff. But AT&T was taking the community towards the open source stuff, towards the own app, towards this kind of open integrations, and now going to Microsoft Azure, and even leasing the team to Microsoft. That was a little bit surprising for us, people following the news. There are a lot of assessments and analysis in the community and the online, but we have to wait and see, because again, it's very hard to build conclusions on press release. You have to see what will happen in the future. You have to see the designs, how they will handle the existing cloud stacks, these kinds of things. So I have like two more slides and 5 minutes. So maybe I can take one question. Yeah. So one question is, AWS largely public domain, or are they also moving to private direction to meet country-specific regulatory? So that's a very good point. So hyperscalers are smart, okay? So in the countries that may face this kind of regulations, they just go locally. And you see AWS, for example, building the regions in Bahrain. They will do that in UAE, in Emirates as well. So they are going to do that, and Asia did that. And the solution for AWS on the edge, the outpost or the wavelengths, they deploy their stack in the CSP premises. So yes, they will tackle this issue by localizing their cloud stacks. So let me just go and quickly on the value proposition. We only have 5 minutes. So what is actually the hyperscalers value proposition? Take it one by one. So hyperscalers can give you the full service model. IaaS, PaaS, software as a service, function as a service, container as a service, anything as a service, okay? They are really the market leader in this kind of, different cloud offering, different cloud models. And what is actually give them the advantage is their large partners ecosystem. You saw AWS when I showed the AWS case and a lot of partners. So if you get AWS, you can get software as a service, anything from anyone. For example, you like the OSS of Netcracker, it is there. You like OSS of Amdocs, it is there. You like the OSS of Nokia, it is there. Ericsson, it is there. 5G core from many vendors out of the box. You can just go to the portal and see it. So it's a very nice digital experience you will get, and a lot of partners that is there. The global outreach with anything as a service dominance, that they have a globality or a global sense of the service. For example, if you are an operator that you are looking to offer not a local service, no, a service that can be provided to your enterprise in your country and in other countries, you can easily partner with a hyperscaler to make sure that the same service is provided into different regions or different countries. So this is something that makes hyperscalers consistent with the enterprises. They can give the same service to the enterprise branches around the world, which is something that CSPs unfortunately cannot do, or most of them cannot do. The PaaS capabilities and the huge community of developers, and guys, it happened to me actually 3 weeks ago. I am like a network guy coming from mobility, and I participated with 3 colleagues in a hackathon by AWS, and the target was to do an application on the edge for AWS and Verizon. We were a team of 4, and 3 of us had this kind of development skills of Amazon, of AWS. In 3 weeks, by using the PaaS capabilities that is provided by AWS, we were able to develop a mobile application that can save people from animal attacks in the US. So we did that in 3 weeks. So imagine the same case in a mobile operator environment. What the time does the mobile operator take to deliver a certain service? Let me tell you, voice over LTE, for example. It can take months. But we, as a group of developers, with these PaaS capabilities, and because my team had this knowledge, we were able to develop an application in 3 weeks. So you see the difference. Second thing, ready to deploy solution for verticals. So they invested a lot on having solutions for vehicles, solution for IoT. So hyperscalers come with ready-made solutions. For example, if you get Azure for operators, you get a full solution for IoT, Azure IoT. So it actually reduces the time to market, give you the edge. If you partner with Microsoft, then you have a ready solution in no time for IoT. Hyperscaler or hyperscale cloud infrastructure, no one can compete with their cloud infrastructure, right? If you build your cloud, you will never be able to compete the volume and the number of POPs around the world to have the cloud, so you can approach more markets and you can provide wider services. The last thing, and actually it is an important thing, the kind of partnership and billing models and deal models that hyperscalers offer for CSPs, it's very different from the way they used to deal with their telco vendors like Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei, and I'm one of them, by the way. But this kind of flexibility is usually provided by hyperscalers. They can even switch from your capex model to opex model, like pay as you go. Okay, so that's something, that kind of flexibility that actually operators need from their vendors, telco vendors, but they find it, I mean, I would say, usually with the hyperscaler. That's how you partner with AWS, with Google, with. So these are like an aspects of the value proposition. There are other value propositions, but these are the main six stuff. I have the last slide, but before I do that, I just want to, I would say, issue my last poll. And it is very important to understand your point of view about what will be the impact on the telco vendors. So please participate. You have 1 minute. And when I say the telecom vendors, I mean for sure, the big names like Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, NEC, ZTE, Cisco, Juniper. Okay, we have 5 seconds left, and we have 6 colleagues left. So I urge you, please, to participate. Okay, so I'm going to end this one and show you the results. So you see that the majority is thinking that with the suitable model, telco vendors can still benefit from the market trend, which is a very, I would say, positive attitude. 29% thinking that telco vendors will be negatively impacted, but the most interesting thing that 0% think that there is no impact. And that shows that there will be an impact, okay, either positively or negatively. That depends actually on how the vendor will adapt and how will do this kind of partnerships. Will the vendor be part of this kind of engagement models, or it will stick to his own silo stack? I mean, it depends on the market direction. So let me continue. I have the last slide, which are the opportunities and threats. And I'm sorry, I just took maybe 5 minutes more. So what are the opportunities and the threats? So opportunities for CSPs is actually they will be able to broaden their portfolio, because the offerings from the hyperscaler and from the operator will be somehow merged to have one combined offer for the enterprise. That means richer portfolio and more reach out, and hopefully more revenues. Hyperscale had great access to enterprises on the last 5 years or last 10 years. So small, medium enterprises, they like the hyperscalers. So it is believed that with this kind of partnership between hyperscaler and CSPs, there will be more reach out to enterprise. And for hyperscaler, there will be more reach out to governmental entities. The CSP will enhance the past capabilities on his side. They will get machine learning stuff, the AI assurance, development studio, design studios. And as I showed you, we were able to develop an application in 3 weeks for AWS and Verizon in one of the contests. So that's really a past capability that the operators needed. CapEx to OpEx model shift, we explained that instead of doing big investments and big chunks of money and waiting for revenues to come like across like years and 5 years and do this TCO model, you shift to OpEx model and you pay as you go. If you get like high traffic, you consume more, you pay more. If there is no gain, then you don't pay. So that's the mindset for the greenfield operators. Enhanced time to market. You see the time needed to introduce a new service in hyperscalers that can be days or weeks, even less than that, while you can still, you used to have like months to introduce a service in a legacy way of a CSP environment. So for sure, with the partnership, there will be a more enhanced time to market TTM. Enterprises and users, and we like the digital experience of the hyperscalers, right? We like to go to Amazon and pick a service and buy something. So this kind of experience and digital experience will be conveyed from hyperscalers to CSPs. So CSPs will enjoy this new feeds or new digital experience by the hyperscalers, and will be able to provide this kind of digital experience to their customers. Opportunity at global service footprint. Now the operator with the right partnership can provide services to all his customers across the globe, not only limited to the region or the country. And then overcome the investment challenge, because people working on the capex cycle to raise money and to convince stakeholders to put money or to have money invested in a certain year capex or a certain year cycle, it's very hard, it's very difficult. So switching to OpEx model might be a solution to overcome the investment challenge. The threats, okay, nothing comes without threats. So the threats, it's a potential vendor lock-in. The cost of migration that to on-prem cloud is very costly and very difficult. Most of these applications are only certified with the stack, the cloud stack provided by the hyperscaler. So it is a potential vendor lock-in for sure. Connectivity only share. Actually, I quoted that, and I listened to one executive from VMware who was talking in one of the conferences. So he said that it is very risky for mobile operators to sit on the table with the hyperscalers with only connectivity. So if you are only providing connectivity and the rest value-added services are coming from hyperscalers, then you are in a risky position, because you see there are a lot of attempts from hyperscalers to achieve connectivity by satellites, by balloons. You see these initiatives. So what the question is, what if the hyperscalers were able to get the connectivity without having a dependency on the mobile operator? What will be the game by that time? So it is a threat. You have to contribute as a CSP with more than connectivity. The managed services, because most of the operators are relying on a full managed service by vendors, right? So when now you scatter the applications in AWS, in Azure, in on-prem, how you do the managed service? For 100%, it will be very complicated. And what you save in the cloud, most probably you will pay it on a managed service. So it needs a change even in the operational mindset. Security and regulations, and we explained that a lot of countries in the Middle East, in the Arabs and the Gulf, prohibit putting like data or customer data in a public cloud. And what is also suspicious, how you are going to do the lawful interception, how you can intercept the traffic from the gateways or whatever to the legal entities that are doing the lawful interception. So having a lawful interception on the public cloud, it's not yet clear. Impact on existing partnership and market vendors, and that's a very important point, and people working on that domain understand that. So if you are an operator that's having a partnership, or for example with vendor X, okay, and for some non-technical reasons, for some political reasons, vendor X cannot be onboarded on the hyperscaler cloud. And by the way, we saw that in the last 2 years in time of Trump, when there was a conflict between China and USA. So a lot of American vendors stopped cooperating with Chinese vendors, and they stopped the integrations. And this is something away from politics, will impact the networks, right? Will impact the operator's life cycle. So if you are having this kind of partnership with these vendors, and you bring this kind of new cloud models, what guarantee that these vendors will work on or will adapt or really integrate to these hyperscaler public clouds? It's not guaranteed, and it is really a threat, especially if you have a big portion of your traffic running on these vendors' applications. And a lot of other threats. I just I didn't actually try to take that from from Google, but I just wanted to do that from my analysis and from my experience working with both sides, CSP and the hyperscaler and even the telco vendors. So I hope this slide at least leads to some of the main opportunities and some threats moving forward. I mean, in the relation between hyperscalers and CSPs. That was my last slide. We took 10 minutes, more, and I hope it was an informative webinar and session. I will have a look on the questions, and I will group that and put that offline. But before I do that, let me just quickly maybe have a quick overview on the questions. So the question is, what if platforms follow the same approach like AWS and Microsoft? I mean, pay as you go. So the question is the other vendors or other platform providers will follow the same approach of AWS and Microsoft, pay as you go or pay as you grow? I believe so. I believe eventually most of the vendors will try to get in this kind of partnership mentality, and instead of getting this kind of chunks and capex, they will follow the same approach. What about the other players like Equinox, HP, Dell, that centers, they might help Telco Cloud grow? Well, these are the current partners of the current Telco Clouds, HP, Dell, and these kind of things. This, for sure, they help Telco Cloud grow. They have a role in Edge DCs, because at the end, infrastructure, there are a room of competition and a lot of vendors in the infrastructure, but in the software part, it's a little bit, I would say, the competition is tough. What are the challenges for hyperscalers to host the bulky VNFs? Well, the bulky VNFs, actually, it's not cloud friendly, and the way of redundancy, for example, is a legacy things. They are not relying on Kubernetes. They are still VM based. So these are the challenges hyperscaler. Hyperscaler will have to do a lot of effort and development to support, I would say, phased or outdated VNFs. So this is not their mentality. They want to focus on the way forward and the cloud native part. The last two questions. Since hyperscalers host most of the OTT, are we expecting to see hyperscalers to bridge the business model gap between CSP and OTT? Well, that's a very good question. The question is, hyperscalers host the OTT, which are like the enemies of the CSPs. So will hyperscaler help to bridge the business model gap between CSPs and OTT? Frankly, I don't think so. Because it's a very direct competition. If you take an OTT, like for example, SD-WAN vendor using AWS, and then AWS partner with operator X, don't expect operator X will cooperate with the SD-WAN, because most probably the operator will have his own choices, his own setups, and operator most probably will try to enforce his partners on AWS. For example, in this case, they picked AWS, they picked Nokia, they picked other vendors, and then they asked them to cooperate. And then you see the press releases. So it will be the other way around. The last question, Mohammed Al-Ashri. Happening innovation to cloud. Okay, the question is how this kind of things, telco network, and the way of thinking will be projected in the Middle East. And taking into consideration the business and high competition with actually lower budget and financial challenge. So the question is, okay, in the Middle East, you have more financial challenge, more lower budget, okay? So do I think that this can be projected in the Middle East? Well, frankly, I think Middle East is a perfect fit, okay? Because, for example, ORAN, okay, what is the main, I would say, land for ORAN to flourish and grow? It's actually with the operator that they want to lower their TCO, right? So it's a budget-oriented thing, beside the automation and the innovation and all kinds of things. But the motivation to go to O-RAN is to lower the TCO, lower the budget. So it fits well in Latin America. It fits well in Africa, and lately in Egypt, they are trying to approach or to deploy. So the same way, if the operator in the Middle East see that this will help them to have a better TCO, to better revenue or profitability at the end, then 100% they will go this direction. I would like to thank you, and sorry I took 15 minutes out of our time. Thanks a lot. I will gather all the questions that were not covered, and I will try to put that in LinkedIn and cover them. Thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoyed the session. It has been, or it is always a pleasure to meet you guys, and thanks a lot.